Well, Andrew Tate, social media influencer, it says here. Andrew, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. Very good to see you. Now, we let's summarize where we are on your legal problems.
Sure.
There are now no charges against you, and yet you are not yet free to leave, though I understand that might soon change.
Yeah, correct. The UK Foreign Office and the State Department under Biden decided to get me off the internet. So they instigated the Romanians to come up and drum up with charges, which they've done globally. And they've also done domestically. We know with January 6th, they have no problem using the lawfare system to attack people who they do not like. They decided that the process was the punishment, and it's been a certainly very long process. 3 years in, the first case was destroyed in Romanian court, which is a miracle in and of itself to win anything in a Romanian court. And then they launched a second one just to keep us under some form of arrest measure, even though we've yet to be indicted with that second case. A lot of people at home, unfortunately, still seem to believe that things typed on a computer by a prosecutor are golden. And if you're smart enough to understand that the media is a lie, and smart enough to understand that a lot of history is a lie, you'd be pretty silly to believe that anything typed up on a computer by somebody aiming to destroy your life is the truth by gospel. So we've yet to be convicted of any crime. We're currently not charged with any crime. However, we remain trapped inside of the territory of Romania because it is the process which is the punishment, and the primary objective was to get us off of the internet.
It's a beautiful country. You could be trapped in worse countries, let me assure you.
It's a very beautiful place. Yes, it's a beautiful country. However, I do like to think that the Western powers were salivating at the fact that we were some of the largest thorns in their side. And instead of demonstrating that their own political systems and their own judicial systems are corrupted, like they had to do with January 6th or the attacks on Trump, etc., they got to use a foreign judicial system.
Yeah.
Because they have no problem at all with them looking corrupt. They don't care. So for them, it was actually fantastic that unfortunately we were in Romania and they didn't have to degrade the reputation of their own judicial bodies, and they could simply say, get him. Here we are.
Yeah, well, we've been across this many times before, and Britain has been that foreign power thus degraded. In the case of my friend Julian Assange, for example.
Absolutely. The Americans should stand there and pretend it was nothing to do with them when the whole thing was them from head to toe.
Exactly. And Julian is Julian was effectively crucified and hasn't even yet fully recovered from the persecution, from the crucifixion that they attempted, and we don't know if he ever will fully recover. We pray for that outcome. They're very selective, of course, on sex cases, aren't they? I mean, for example, I watch Bill Clinton swanning around at every liberal soiree.
Yep.
When he was the most rapacious sexual predator ever to serve in the White House. He put a Havana cigar in the vagina of his teenage intern and then smoked it.
Yep.
But that hasn't crossed him off the dinner party invitation lists in Georgetown in the way that, for example, Trump, whose predatory years were less long and less predatory than Bill Clinton's.
Well, this is the thing about the subjectiveness. Not only are we talking about subjectiveness in laws, because that is a common theme you'll see in lawfare. A lot of laws are actually very subjective, and it decides if they want to go through the efforts of trying to make it apply to you or not. But when it comes to sexual crimes, they're especially subjective. And of course, every full-grown man has a degree of history. Plus, it damages and tarnishes your name even if you're not convicted of anything. So it's the perfect weapon for them to find a man they don't like, look through his entire sexual history ever, lie by omission. They can speak to 1,000 girls, 999 say you're a great guy. One of them doesn't even have to say you're a bad person. They can say, I don't really remember, or he's not nice to me anymore. They can sit in a 6-hour police interview with the police constantly raining down their neck, trying to convince them to say something that they didn't even want to say in the first place. They can sign a piece of paper, and now your life and reputation are destroyed. And they've only done it because they're trying to find a crime to fit the man, as opposed to trying to fix any kind of crime in the first place. They're not trying to protect anybody. And it's very selective. They sit there and they choose who they're going to do it to and who they're not. The people who were literally on Epstein's island are saying my brother and I are human traffickers because we had girlfriends before. And the whole thing is a setup and it's a joke. And then to substantiate their claim, a prosecutor types up garbage, and then the mainstream media repeats the garbage. And before you know it, everyone's out there just believing the garbage. It's kind of amazing to me after the era of COVID, after they've lied to us about Gaza, Israel, after they've lied to us about World War II, after they lied to us every single day on the television, the second they see somebody who's doing massive damage to their media sphere, to their lies, and they come up with some prosecutor papers and some garbage that people believe it at all. It's absolutely insane. And I hope all the men at home, every single man who's watching this understands that the subjectivity of sexual crimes, the fact that they can go back through your past and find a girl who retrospectively removes consent because she no longer is prepared to defend you. Not because she has anything against you. She's just no longer prepared after not speaking to you for 10 years, after you've moved on and got married and forgotten her. She's not prepared to sit there and defend you for 6 hours. She just wants to get out of the room. If she's not prepared to sit there and put her life and her reputation on the line for you, that's enough for you to get wrecked. And they know this. And that's why they do it purposefully. It's absolute subjectivity. It's lawfare, and it's the perfect weapon. It's the perfect weapon because how do you prove? How do you prove retrospectively that 10 years ago or 20 years ago that Assange didn't rape a girl in Sweden? How do you even defend yourself against these things? It's incredible.
Of course, they're not the only two. I mean, Russell Brand suffered the same kind of thing. But I tell you, I discovered something. I don't know if you know this. May shock you if you don't. I looked back at the BBC's coverage of the case of you and your brother. And do you know who the man was? Oh, so holy, oh, so stentorian, condemning you on the BBC. Hugh Edwards.
That's right.
Hugh Edwards, the despicable paedophile who should be rotting in prison but is not inexplicably, was telling people that you were a danger to young people.
It's those with dirty fingers who point. And what's most interesting about that is the BBC have managed to find the time and find the money to print negative things about my brother and I every single day for 3 years without fail, trying to psyop the populations at home that we're somehow dangerous. But when Hugh Edwards, someone who works for them, gets caught and convicted, within 48 hours it's out of the news cycle, which then goes into showing how important the MSM and the media is in all of these things. Because what people talk about and what people remember is simply what the media wants to print over and over and over again. When they're trying to do a wrap-up smear, when they're trying to psyop and damage the reputations of innocent men, they'll print about it every single day. They'll talk about it every single day for years. When one of their own is caught, they'll memory hole it instantly. And this is what the media has always done. I don't think a lot of people at home understand that their primary weapons are lying by omission. This is what they do. They don't have to lie outright all of the time. If they can just tell you some of the truth and ignore 85% of the truth, they can sit there and say, oh, well, we've told you the truth. We haven't lied because, look, we've told you the truth. But by missing out the whole story, missing out all the context, they're effectively lying. And this is what they do all of the time. They will sit there and constantly say my brother and I are accused of heinous things, which we have not done, and ignore the people on the other side of the fence who are convicted of the heinous things, making us seem like the only bad people on the planet. It's truly incredible. And the MSM media are complicit in nearly all, I would argue, basically all of the ills of the world today. You can tie back to the MSM media and their ability to keep people's minds focused on the exact wrong things or believing the exact wrong things as they sleepwalk into destruction.
We'll come back maybe to some of the legal issues, but I'm keener to get on to your philosophy and your new party that you've launched. But before going there, it's, I think, worth spending 2 minutes on why it was exactly you became the thorn in the side of the Biden administration, because this is all a Biden administration gig.
Yes, it's the Biden administration has the UK Foreign Office.
And the UK, yeah, but that's the same thing.
Of course it is.
The UK Foreign Office is a part of the US government, as we're now discovering. So is the government of Denmark, and soon the government of Canada. But that's another matter. Yeah. The US government of Joe Biden could not stomach your burgeoning reach, popularity, call it whatever you like, audience, numbers, Because you were not buying their narratives on what exactly?
Well, it's not only that I wasn't buying their narratives, I'd also argue it was the subsect of the demographic that I had control over. It was primarily young men, primarily military-age males that were watching my content. And my content, one of the slogans of it is to resist the slave mind. It's to ignore the things that they tell you to do and to think for yourself and to face objective reality head on. And I would teach men to get strong and be brave and not be afraid to say what they truly believe. And that everything that is told to them is being told for the benefit of the people who are speaking as opposed to the benefit of the young men themselves. And they had a real problem because it's the young military-age males who die for a country. It's the young military-age males who are the backbone of the labor force. They pay the most taxes. They do the worst jobs. I would argue that young men in the world today have the worst lives. More of them go to jail. They're less educated. They're more depressed. Like, these are the people that you need for society to run truly, who are going to go out there and have to believe in the country they live in, to sacrifice their lives to keep it all functioning. And they're the ones who are getting screwed over the hardest. And I was a voice saying, look, these people don't care about you. They're using you as slaves. As soon as you stand up and stick your neck out or say anything you don't like, you're going to catch a sexual assault case. They want you to pretend that men can get pregnant and believe all this garbage that you know isn't true. They have HR departments of women henpicking you and stopping you from thinking what you want to think and saying what you want to say. And this is what they were genuinely afraid of. I was anti-COVID. I was anti the Ukraine war. I was making it very clear that our politicians are incompetent and they're liars. I was highlighting the corruption inside of government, just highlighting exactly how they waste money endlessly. Every single show I was doing was showing the lies in the MSM and the media and showing how they lie. And that's why they tried to get me off the internet. Initially, they banned me from everything instantly, overnight, at once. I woke up and every single application on my phone didn't log in anymore. And after the ban, within 2 weeks, this criminal case in Romania seemed to pop up. And before you know it, I was in jail because the ban wasn't particularly effective. So I think a lot of people at home have this asinine view of the world where they think that you're going to have a media empire or a media landscape which is going to be counter to the national security interests of a country. It's interesting, if you talk about Russia, or you talk about Saudi Arabia, or you talk about Iran, most people will accept that the news that is being shown is in direct correlation with the state's security objectives. But when we talk about the West, people seem to think that we have these competing forces, like our left arm is going to fight against our right arm. But that's not how things work. If a government decides it wants to achieve X, it's going to try its very best to have its media landscape also support that objective and convince people that objective is good. You can see it all the time. Nobody knew who the Houthis were or talked about them until we had to blow them up. And then now everyone's talking about how bad the Houthis are for 10 minutes, and then we blow them up, and then we stop talking about them. It's to convince the population it's okay to waste our money as the old people freeze to death, to fly planes halfway across the world and blow up people no one's ever heard of, no one's ever interacted with, nobody even knows. And this is what they do. So for you to sit and believe that a national security apparatus or a state will decide to achieve X and then allow its own media machine to be counter to those objectives is asinine. Your left arm and your right arm work together. So if they're trying to convince young men that they should sit in a sexless marriage, in a job they hate, paying 50% taxes to a country that doesn't respect them, and be depressed and shut up and just do it anyway, and I'm convincing them there's another way, I'm a problem. I'm a thorn in their side. And what weapons does a country have? It has a legal system. It has laws. So it says, well, this is a problem. Here's his name. They give your name to a prosecutor and they say, get rid of him. And they find something. They go through your tax affairs. They go through your sexual history. They go through all the traffic cameras and find the times you were speeding. You name it. They just get you off the internet. And that's the primary objective.
It hasn't entirely worked, but let's talk about what the reach you had was. You were reaching millions of people. I told the story in the introduction. It's the truth. Men on a plane from Manchester with me last night were singing your name. And they were all working class men. Most of them were of the age that you are describing, but not actually all of them. Yeah. They like you. Why?
Well, now I think the problem they have is they've martyred me to a degree. So now the problem is that I'm very thankful Trump won, and I feel like there's a shift in the consciousness. I feel like we've won the war against the Matrix. But you have 3 lives. First, they ban you, and if that doesn't work, they put you in jail, and if that doesn't work, they kill you. But I've used 2 of my lives, and I feel like that may have been enough to win the culture war and change things, because we live in an informational war, as described previously with why the media pick up certain subjects and talk about certain things and ignore others. But now they've martyred me, right? So a lot of my fans who used to like the things I said now understand that I am prepared to suffer for the things I say. And that makes the things I say even more powerful than before. So the mistake they made, I guess, is they thought my influence would wane, or they thought I would shut up, or they thought I would be afraid. That didn't happen. Bravery is always inspiring, especially to that demographic. So when I came out of jail, I had a lot of messages from very powerful people saying, Andrew, it's time to be quiet and this will all go away. And I did the absolute opposite. And I think that now they've kind of galvanized me as this hero of resistance against the Matrix. You probably know something about that yourself. And before you know it, you get some fans. You know, it's kind of crazy how it works.
Yeah. Now let's delve into what it is you're saying. I'm not actually all that familiar with it, but let me be clear. I have 3 sons and I have 3 daughters.
Wow. Congratulations.
By the grace of God. And I want my sons to grow up to be men.
Yep.
I want my girls to grow up to be, well, one of them already is a mother of 5. So I've got 3 daughters, but 4 granddaughters from my first child. So the rights of boys and the responsibilities of boys and the need for them to grow up right is important to me. But so is, for obvious reasons, their relationship to girls and women.
Of course.
Why is it that people think that you have a problem with women?
Well, they think it's a zero-sum game. They think if you talk about the positives of masculinity, you're instantly attacking femininity. And this is not the case. Unfortunately, masculinity has been under such attack now in the Western world that if a man even acts remotely masculine, he is considered a threat and a danger to the world. If you look at the men who are purported and pushed by the Matrix, they're barely men in any regard. They'll sit there and say, we don't hate men, we like this guy. Well, so that's a girl. That's not a man. And if you act like a man, they find it threatening. Unfortunately, the truth of the world is the world's a very dangerous, scary place. And when you're a good man, yeah, you may come across as intimidating because it's your job to protect and provide. It's your job to be dangerous in the right scenarios. It's not your job to be uncontrolled. But if you call a police officer, you want a toxically masculine man. If you call a firefighter, you want a toxically masculine man. Who's going to go and defend our borders? Toxically masculine men. So as I stick up for masculinity, unfortunately, they do this very clever subversion. And they try and find exceptions that disprove the rule. And they say, but men who are toxically masculine, look at this one guy who did this heinous crime. He raped this woman, whatever. And I say, yeah, that's obviously bad, of course. But 99.9% of men who are standing up for what they believe in, training hard in the gym, being strong, being unafraid, being patriotic, loving their country, loving their society, most of them are not doing those heinous things. They're actually protecting against those type of people. And all of this is just a conflation and this attack to try and get rid of masculinity. The primary protectors of society will always be the masculine men. This is why they killed this is why they killed the boys when they walked in. When the Greeks or the Romans walked in, they killed all the men first. They kept the women and children. They killed the men to avoid an uprising. So now they can't kill us, so they try very hard to neuter us. And if you have any kind of masculine desires in the world, you're seen as bad, and they try and shut them down instantly. They label it as something. They call you, there's something wrong with you. They're trying to tell young men in the world today there's something wrong with them for wanting to get up and work hard and get rich and get important and have a voice that people respect and train hard in the gym and have a fast car and be known. They try to say all of these are bad things, and they're absolutely not. And what they're trying to do is neuter the resistance force, because it's always been the young men who are the rebellion. It's the young men who are the revolution. And this is what they're most afraid of. So as they screw these people over hardest, they have to try their very best to neuter and remove any fighting spirit from them. And isn't that the problem we have in the UK today? Isn't the problem we face in the UK today that our young military-age men have basically no fighting spirit, and the few who stand up for little girls who get stabbed to death end up going to jail for having a social media post? This isn't about race. This isn't about whether you agree with them or not. This is about people who are upset, quite rightly, at a heinous action and decided to stand up and say, this is absolutely insane. For the first time, people in Britain did something, and they all just got instantly locked up. And who's left? Now we're sitting here as they threaten to raise the TV license 25% to people who don't even watch it, and we just sit there and swallow it endlessly. We're in an abusive relationship with our government in the United Kingdom, because there's not a single man who can be bothered to get up off of his couch and walk down outside Parliament and say that enough is enough. They can't do this in other countries.
But the problem with the Southport case to which you allude is that the wrong targets were identified and attacked. it was said by right-wing influencers that the mass murderer, this demon, was A, a Muslim, he wasn't, B, an illegal immigrant who'd arrived on a dinghy, and thus the ire, hatred, was focused on Muslims and illegal immigrants, when in fact the perpetrator, now pled guilty, was neither Muslim nor an illegal immigrant.
I agree with you. So then why did this happen? This happened because of a complete lack of transparency in the media. This happened because of grooming gangs which have gotten away with crimes for so long which weren't being exposed. This happened because the media decided at random to use the picture of an 11-year-old boy for this mass murderer as opposed to using pictures of him as a full-grown man. My brother and I have just been attacked for the last 3 years. Why are they not using pictures of us as children? They're trying to elicit sympathy from the public, trying to convince people that this person is not a bad person and not a mass murderer as he stabs little girls 122 times. The media has done nothing but lie to the population over and over and over again. And then we have this mass outrage, which I agree with you. People believed incorrect things. This wouldn't happen if we had a transparent media. And this wouldn't happen if we had a transparent government. And this wouldn't happen if we had a government that actually cared about the population. When you have a group of people who you only lie to and you only abuse endlessly, eventually there's going to be a violent reaction to that. And that's what Southport was. It's not I really think it's absolutely criminal and insane that after this murder, the first thing they did was drag up some child's picture of the murderer at 11, trying to solicit sympathy for him and putting him all over the news as a child. There was no reason to do that besides a massive psyop on the populace. And the population may not have realized exactly what the psyop was, but innately they were angered by it. They were looking at it going, this doesn't make sense. Why are they showing me a kid's picture? This is garbage. If the media would have stood up and was honest from the beginning, I think we would have avoided a lot of it. I mean, what makes you mad? Being lied to, right? Isn't that the reason we even have shows in the first place? Because they've lied to us for so long. And we're sitting here trying to get the truth out of these people. So I think, yeah, Southport was a violent overreaction because of the suppression of the human spirit under the weight of endless lies. And I think it's about time our government stops lying to us, obfuscating the truth, conflating the truth, trying their very best to psyop us, and expecting us not to come to our own conclusions. And this is the thing about the UK. You know, it's really interesting you talk about free speech. Free speech is probably the only weapon of the common man. This is why they've tried so hard to shut it down. It's all we have. A billionaire can stand up and lie to you because a billionaire has real power. A billionaire can stand on a microphone and say, I'm going to go right, and then get in private and say, let's go left. I'm going to go up, he tells to people, and then he goes behind the doors and says he's going to go down. A billionaire has real power. Our only power as the common man is our unification. We have to get in a group of thousands at the same time. We can't make those kind of power plays by lying. We can only do it by getting in large groups. So how do we do that unless we can tell the truth? Unless we can sit there and say what we think and find other people who think like us and have a free speech, we don't have the ability to ever rally and organize ourselves against our destruction. Which is why, after Southport, they've come down even harder on opinions. Not because they were lies. Yes, some of them were lies. That was perfect for them to use as an excuse. The truth is, they don't want people talking freely in the UK, because if enough people talk freely, enough people get in a group, and enough people are in a group, then their whole charade ends. Because we can't lie like they can. Our only weapon is free speech, and that's why they try and take it away from us.
Let me clarify something. It's one of my jobs in life, has been. I've represented more people of colour than any British Member of Parliament ever. I've represented more Muslims than any British Member of Parliament ever in 5 different places. It's my job, one of my jobs, is to defend them from unfair attack, unfair pillory. Let me clarify. Are you a Muslim?
Yes.
Well, that makes some of the things you seemed to be saying very difficult for former supporters of yours and former supporters of mine, because you seemed to be buying into the reckless synonym of Muslim with groomer, when in fact you and I both know that the vast majority, I was raped by a white colonel in the Army Cadet Force in 1963 or 64. Couldn't get less of a Muslim. these kind of things are carried out by all kinds of people.
Absolutely.
Evil people.
Absolutely.
From all walks of life.
Absolutely. But the problem is, if our government is seen to be showing favor for one group, if our government is seen to be showing favor for one group when they commit a crime and not others, this is where the problems are going to break down in society. This is how multiculturalism collapses. As a Muslim, it's extremely important for me that I stand up and say that as Muslims, we do not need special treatment under the law. We do not need special favor under the law. We do not need protection under the law. No. If we have a scenario in which grooming gangs of white people or grooming gangs of Irish people, Turkmenistani people, Taiwanese people, it doesn't matter, are facing the full force of the law, and it seems that so far, there is some degree of bias towards Muslims committing this crime for whatever reason. This is where you're going to have far-right extremism. This is where you're going to have racism. You're handing gunpowder to the enemies of multiculturalism. You're handing them bullets that they can use. And I'm saying that if you want to have a multicultural society, it's extremely important that everybody is treated fairly under the law. That's probably the first and most important premise. You know very well, if you look at Africa and all these countries, the first thing that ends up in these massive genocides and civil wars is one group feeling like they're not treated fairly under the law. So it's disgusting.
The Labour Party covered up examples of grooming in my own town of Rochdale, for example. They did it for electoral reasons.
And this is my point. So Muslims should stand up and say, we don't need this, we don't want this, we don't advocate for this. No. This is extremely important if you want to be accepted. A lot of Muslims have been mad at me for this point of view. But I've sat there and said, when this happens, if Islamic men commit these heinous crimes and the government covers up for them, and then the far right gets angry, and then instead of Muslims standing up saying this is wrong, they say, oh, you just hate Muslims, you're advocating for and you're perpetuating the problem. I think the only way you make the problem go away is you go up to everybody of any political ideology, of every race, it doesn't matter what it is, and say this is wrong and these people do not deserve protection under the law.
Well, it's worse if a sex abuser is a Muslim because he's pretending to be a believer in God and a follower of the Prophet, just as it's worse if a Catholic priest is a sexual abuser.
Absolutely.
It's not something to be covered up. It's something to be more energetically
well, in an Islamic country, they'd face the death penalty in most of them.
Course.
So this is not the fact that Islam supports these things. But this perpetuation and this conflation comes from the fact that the government covers it up, and then when it's finally exposed, not enough Muslims stand up on side of the far right saying, look, I don't care what religion they are, I don't care what race they are, you cannot cover up crimes subjectively for one group of people and not the others. Instead, Muslims stand up and try and say Islamophobia or whatever, and this causes the divide that the far right want. This is the divide that everybody's been looking for all of this time. You can't give your enemy bullets and then be complaining when they shoot them. So if we want to live in a multicultural society, I think it's extremely important that all Muslims stand up and say what happened was heinous, what happened was wrong, what happened shouldn't ever happen again. And under the law, we do not require or expect special protection. If you're going to start saying to the British government, we want to be treated differently than the native British people, well, now you're going to have a big problem. Maybe not today, but sooner or later. So I think we should all be treated fairly. I don't think there's anything wrong with requesting that or asking for that.
No, of course. Now, look, let's move on to bruv. For American viewers and others around the world, bruv is a kind of Cockney abbreviation of brother. I ain't no liberal, bruv. It's something you've heard me say because it's true. But bruv, B-R-U-V, it's a bit of a genius name you've come up with.
Britain restoring underlying values. Thank you.
So, are you serious about it?
Deadly serious. Absolutely serious. I think that the UK needs a new lease of life in politics that's going to galvanize and motivate the youth to go and vote. I don't know the exact statistics, but it seems that the young people in the UK have basically zero interest in politics when it comes to voting. Yeah. None at all. And I see some of these constituencies are being won with 30,000, 40,000 seats. It's not even that many, really. It's truly incredible that we have the youth of the country, which are suffering greatest at the hands of these insane policies which are being pushed by the current government, and they have no interest in political solution whatsoever. So what we're going to have for a long time is apathy before explosion. once people don't believe in the political solution, what's the other solution? Let's all be realists. The solution is violence. So once all the young people in the world, or the young people of the UK, have lost all interest in politics, they're getting screwed over left and right. They don't believe there's a political solution. They continue to be screwed over left and right. Eventually, it's going to erupt into something like we just described at Southport. So I think it's extremely important we offer a political solution. And young people are not as politically correct, perhaps, as the older generations. They want answers.
That's an interesting observation, and true.
No, it's true. They want answers.
True with my own children.
Yeah, they want answers. They want solutions. They all have TikTok brain. They scroll all day, every day. Most teenagers can't even focus for 2 seconds on a video before losing track or losing interest. They want instant solutions. They want answers. They don't want garbage. They don't want political correctness. They want to see things change. And I think I'm the kind of guy who can exactly get that done. On top of that, I'm not afraid of being the bad guy. And I think this is one of the things that you probably know a lot about as well. In the current UK media landscape, everybody's so afraid of the BBC, or so afraid of the media, or so afraid to have any kind of controversial opinion because they're going to be instantly pinned down with it. I think if you want to get things done, unfortunately, there's no light without dark. And some things are going to have a negative connotation in the short term. And you're just going to have to stand up and do the right thing, irregardless of what the media say about you, if you truly want to fix the nation. And I'm not afraid to be the bad guy. I've been the bad guy my whole life. So I really believe things can get fixed. And I think people who would be a fan of mine understand that. So for those reasons...
What are the underlying values, though? I mean, let's talk about me, you, the average Joe, Joanne, watching this. My values are very different to many of my compatriots. I mean, from the banal, I don't drink alcohol. I've never drunk alcohol in my life. I don't take drugs. I've never even seen a drug. I don't gamble. I'm a big believer in family. I have a wife. I have 6 children. My eldest child is a mother of 5. We have very different values to the man, woman along the street or in the next town.
Yeah.
What are the British underlying values?
Well, it's interesting because I can describe them, but before I do, I think all the British people at home will know what I mean when I say that. Not too long ago, England felt like England. 20 years or so ago, 1999, 2000, 2001, it felt like England. It was still a multicultural society, but it felt like Great Britain. And I feel like the things that are missing are cultural and they're tangible. And it's at a very base level where now when you walk around British cities or you walk around the UK, it just doesn't feel like Britain anymore. And I don't think it's primarily because of immigration, although that's probably a large part of it. I think it's the lack of interaction between people. I think it's the lack of celebration for British culture. I think it's the absolute demonization of British history. I think there's a whole bunch of things which have all concluded in people seeing Britain as just a place they can make money and send money outside the country and perhaps retire in Spain and leave. It's no longer a home. It feels like it's something that people are exploiting and using and raping just for the financial benefit. And for a country to survive, there has to be a strong culture, because culture is always going to be a more powerful driving force than police. And culture is always going to be a more powerful driving force than courts or prison. I think the reason a lot of the crime and a lot of the problems we have going on in the UK today is because nobody likes each other. I just think people don't like each other anymore. And I think we need to find a way to unify people once again.
I agree with that, yeah.
But it's really as simple
as... But I was thinking today, I used to dig so much about Britain. I still dig the football, for example. Yeah. We've got the best football anywhere in the world. But I used to dig the music. I used to dig the fashion. I used to dig our cars, our Land Rovers, our Minis, our Jaguars, our... But
all of those things have been under attack. Well, don't you see how all of those things have gone off the cliff?
They're all gone. That's the problem. Now, I think you're onto something when you say that Britain's just kind of like a platform that people come to and would like to leave, will make what they can while they're there. But the sense of national unity, sense of national pride in the things that I've just described there, has gone.
It's completely gone. And that's the globalist wet dream, right? For them to come along and find a nation which is prosperous and just treat it like a place for which people can extract resource from and then disappear again. But unfortunately, for the people who live there, it's their home. And they've lived there their whole lives, and they want their children to grow up there, and they want it to feel the way it felt for them when they were children. And perhaps the first thing you can do when you unify anything is to unify it under a leadership, Right now, we look at all of our political classes, what they are, corrupt clowns who have no interest in actually fixing any issues. The conservatives want to stand up now and complain about grooming gangs, complain about immigration after 14 years of doing absolutely nothing. So they're clowns. Labor are clearly clowns. The whole thing's a mess. So how can you even unify a country without a leader which can be unified behind? The only way you can then unify a country is with hatred for that leader, which isn't perhaps...
Well, that's exactly what's happened.
Well, that's what's happening now.
Starmer.
Everybody hates him.
He is actually the most hated prime minister in all of British history. And I've lived through some pretty unpopular ones.